Good morning. Please forgive me for speaking this, for presenting this in English, even though English is also not my paternal language. I feel too anxious to present in Portuguese, but please, if you have questions afterwards, do not translate and try in Portuguese and challenge me. But for now, I will read my presentation in English. Thank you for the introduction. I'm very honored to be here, and I want to thank mostly the people who organized this. I know how much work goes in this, but also everyone who invited me, and I hope this is going to be a fruitful conversation and question and afterwards. Question and answer, I'm sorry. So you know that my name is Albrecht Gumlich. I'm actually German. I worked as a conservator of 3D objects at the Getty Research Institute, Department of Conservation and Preservation, between 1998 and 2012. That's for the past 14 years. The title of my presentation is going to be Caring for the Architectural Collection at the Getty Research Institute, and I will call that GRI following this. It's located in Los Angeles, California. But there's a subtitle to it, and it is possibly Care versus Accessibility. Is that a conflict of interest, and what do we do with that conflict? Let me start by giving you a brief overview of what this talk will be about. I will start with an introduction to the Getty Trust and its various entities. The Getty is a big animal, and it has numerous institutes, and that's a little complicated to understand if you've never been there, so I will try to explain that. One of these entities is the Getty Research Institute, where I worked. And more interesting are the special collections of the Getty Research Institutes, and I will then introduce you to the Department of Conservation and Preservation at the GRI. The activities at that Department of Conservation seem to be interesting to me and possibly to you. First, I will speak about it in a general term, then specifically geared towards the architectural collection, which may be interesting for you. I will also mention the trajectory from an unprocessed donation to an accessible archive, the conservation of architectural models. As you know, it can be a complex issue of which only a couple of aspects will be mentioned in particular. Preventive conservation is a topic that is crucial to mention. Reducing the factors of risk, like handling, keeping the environment in mind, are essential, and I do want to make that point clear. Long-term storage and accessibility lead to the conflict of interest that I was mentioning, care versus accessibility. And I hope we can discuss that. So let me start by telling you about the Trust, the big umbrella organization, and its founder, J. Paul Getty. J. Paul Getty became a multimillionaire in the oil business. He left his fortune and personal collection of art to the J. Paul Getty Trust in 1974. The original site was the Getty Villa, very close to the Pacific Ocean. But in 1998, most of the collection moved to a new building complex located 10 miles inland of that villa. So the villa was closed down at that time for a period of time for renovation. So at that new site, as you see here on the slide, the Getty Trust is based today. It's managing the Getty Endowment, the money, the foundation, according to the will of its late benefactor. The Getty Trust is a not-for-profit foundation under which 4 separate programs operate. And that's the complicated part, complicated also because of the names. One of them is the Getty Museum, the J. Paul Getty Museum being probably the most visible part to the public from afar. And there's the Getty Conservation Institute, or GCI. They work on scientific issues and do scientific research not only for local entities, but actually on a worldwide basis. There's the Getty Foundation. The Getty Foundation is the one that actually hands out money to approved projects that one can apply to. It used to be called the Getty Grant Program. And then there's the Getty Research Institute that I will mostly be talking about today. In the upper left corner, you see the entrance facade of the Getty Museum with its signature elements and curvy architecture by Richard Meyer. The almost circular building below is the Getty Research Institute, or GRI. The research, in the name, relates to visual culture in a historical and contemporary context. So it's not scientific research that's being done at the Conservation Institute. It's art historical research for the visual, relating to the visual arts. The mission statement of the GRI states best what it stands for, and forgive me for reading this entire mission statement, but it really explains well. The Getty Research Institute is dedicated to furthering knowledge and advancing understanding of the visual arts. Its research library, with special collections of rare materials and digital resources, serves an international community of scholars and the interested public. It's not the end of the mission statement, it's a continuation still. The Research Institute creates and disseminates new knowledge through its expertise, its active collecting program, public programs, institutional collections, exhibitions, publications, digital services, and residential scholar program. The activities and scholarly resources of the Institute guide and sustain each other, and together provide a unique environment for research, critical inquiry, and debate. That's that much for the mission statement. You can obviously learn more about that and the broad spectrum of online resources of the Getty Research Institute by logging on to www.getty.edu, possibly adding /research/institute. But I will give you that site in the end again. At that site, you will also find information about the holdings related to architecture and design. Beyond books on open stacks, as you have in your own building here, and as you can see in the along the upper edge, in the upper image, there are a number of rare, unique collections in need of special care, the special collections, as we call them. Box loads full of archival material from artists, dealers, collectors, architects, or photographers, only to name a few, are being acquired by the GRI. Recently, there have been an increasing number of donations for us to take care of, making entire archives accessible for research. Archival material from special collections can be requested from the vaults to secure climatized spaces, of which you see the two main ones. There's the seminar room at the top. That's where think tanks may come together, or classes of local regional universities can study clusters of selected objects that can be laid out on the table and discussed. And then there's the reading room at the bottom. It's the quiet space for individual research. It can be used by appointment only by regular library patrons, though, like scholars, curators, students studying the entire archive. All you need is a library card, and applying for that is very easy. Special collections also house much of the material relevant for the Department of Architecture and Contemporary Art, which became a department in its own right roughly 5 years ago. The Getty actually exists for over 30 years, so this department is relatively new. At this point, it contains thousands of architectural sketches and drawings already, and hundreds of 3D models. The overlap of interest of different archives make research under one roof very efficient and convenient. Here you see a drawing from the John Lautner archive of the Malin House project, which was done in 1961, and a well-published black and white print of Julius Schulman, who made the flying saucer-like building, now also known as the Chemisphere. The GRI acquired the complete photographic archive of renowned architectural photographer Julius Schulman. His career was incredibly long. He died just a few years ago at the age of 98. So 70 years of career. He amassed over 70,000 images himself, mostly of architectural projects. And the Julius Schulman archive quickly became the most popular archive of the GRI. So that would be the number one in the top 10. Let me introduce you to the Department of Conservation and Preservation at the GRI, where I work. It used to be a lab caring mostly for books and paper in the very beginning, slightly different from the specialized conservation department at the museum. The museum is on the same site, but has a slightly different approach to conservation. I have trouble with the microphone, I'm sorry. I don't know where to hold it. No, it's getting worse, right? The vast, am I at the right? Yes, I am. The vast diversity, mostly of the increasingly large special collections, make it necessary to combine a number of conservation specialties in the one conservation department at the GRI. While at the museum, conservation is very specialized. There's a paintings conservation lab, and they only deal with paintings. We deal with numerous materials at the GRI. At the GRI, there are seven staff members. We work on books and works on paper, as in the beginning, including the archival architectural sketches and drawings, objects, which include architectural models, photographs, many photographs, negatives, prints, black and white, color, transparencies, and a lot of, or increasingly magnetic media, which needs to be reformatted in a lab apart. And of course, like any conservation lab, we need to mount things, and therefore we have a mount maker who's often not recognized because his work is not seen. Frames are often overlooked, or mounting is overlooked, and I do want to give him credit. The condition of an incoming archival material, whether it's donation or acquisition, should be checked at as early as possible, best before being shipped to our institute. Already at that point, we should consider the follow-up actions, estimating the needed time and money for initial care and ongoing maintenance. Of immediate importance is the danger of contaminating by possible pest infestation. We obviously need to avoid importing pests into our facilities. We all know, or can imagine, that costs for facility-wide fumigations would be horrendous. With regards to our archive and storage, we need to check carefully before any shipment to our facilities for indications of woodworm, silverfish, cockroaches, and things of that sort. Before going ahead with a more detailed assessment of the condition and with the cataloging, one may have to fumigate all pest-infested incoming archival material. What you see in the images is a special airtight tent in form of this red bubble. It can hold a nitrogen atmosphere, removing all oxygen from the atmosphere and the infested object, that is. So it can hold a nitrogen atmosphere over a long period of time. The big advantage of nitrogen over conventional fumigation options is that nitrogen is not toxic to the operator. Very important for me. Our senior scientist colleague Shin Mayakawa, who works as a senior scientist at the Getty Conservation Institute, where they do the scientific research, and in fact he's also a consultant for many sites in Brazil, he has been very helpful in setting up the equipment. So when our expertise is not enough, we can go across campus and get help, which is very convenient. The anoxia treatment, or fumigation for that matter, as well as the initial processing and subsequent work on large items from architectural collections, make the availability of ample space a necessity, and I'm sure you know what that problem is about. Almost any institution knows has a lack of space. Some of these tasks, yes, I'm at the right one. Some of these tasks can be performed at an external warehouse the Getty is leasing now in order to increase space. This off-site storage of oversized items in large boxes or bulky crates provides enough room for many conservation-related issues, like fumigation, as we saw before, of the incoming collections, or rehousing, as we call it, on a large scale, and some treatments of oversized items. All that can be done at the external warehouse. Decades ago, the condition assessments of incoming archives were performed with pencil on paper in form of a condition report. This may possibly include treatment proposals of what to do with a damaged item that is incoming. A little later, Word documents were introduced, and about 15 years ago, we started using a commercially available database, FileMaker Pro, as many of you know. But currently the Getty is using, and that is system-wide, something they call the Museum System, TMS. It's a database in order to simultaneously share information with other departments. The curatorial department, conservation staff like us, or at the museum, we also exchange information. Or the museum exhibition department, there's exhibition design. We also work with registrars together. All of us can share information simultaneously in-house through the museum system, our database. The availability of sufficient space and proper packing, we call housing, are common problems. One is physical and the other is a chemical problem, though both of them are expensive to solve. In these two slides, you see a common reality of an incoming archive, which I can imagine many of you may know as well. Stacked cardboard boxes, particularly dangerous if you don't know what's in these boxes yet. Flimsy corrugated cardboard taped together, sometimes not even covering the entire model. Foam of some sort is stuffed between the box and the model in an attempt to prevent movement of the collection item within the box. While the outer material is acidic, the inner foam may become sticky, fusing with a collection item where it is in direct contact. I would like to give you the definition of what we call rehousing because it's a proper term that we use a lot, and any institution may come up with different terms, but rehousing for us means the fabrication of a custom-built container or box, protecting a specific collection item during long-term storage and possibly travel. In case of the travel, you may add a crate according to the 3 dimensions of this rehoused box, which is very easy to order afterwards when a piece is chosen for travel. While it is in storage, it doesn't need the crate yet, making it slightly smaller but protecting it. Most importantly, the box should have the following characteristics. It should be inert, meaning stable, chemically stable. All material chosen to fabricate the box should be chemically unreactive with the content. I say should because reality is always tricky. It should also be lightweight and sturdy, meaning resistant. It should provide adequate protection from physical impact, direct handling, dust, light-induced damage, and others. And the box should be obvious to first-time users, which means it should be self-explanatory. Which side is front, which way does the model enter? And if it is not self-explanatory, then you may have to add instructions of how to remove the model and where to hold the model when you move it out, in case somebody does that for the first time. I will still point that out a little later. Taking a closer look on the far left of the left slide, note the outer wooden reinforcement of the box and support of the dangling elements of the model inside that triangular thing that is supporting the model. A soft surface that structurally, the soft surface but structurally firm foam supports the actual model and prevents movement of the archival model during transport. Substituting the stuffed yellow or gray polyurethane foam that we saw in the earlier slide. That foam is really the worst you can get into direct contact with the actual collection item because it not only becomes brittle, but it may be stuck to the actual item, and getting it off is hardly possible. So when we protect something, we got to consider the consequences. The loose elements and fragments belonging to the model are being kept together in a strapped down box, which you can see on the bottom right. In the bottom right, you see this little yellow thing which is strapped down. And in this case, we did not have time to actually work on the conservation of this model, so we shipped it to our new warehouse facility with the loose elements in this box within the box. Yes, these boxes, we have a name for these boxes. We call these custom-made boxes inner liner because it can serve as an inner box of the more sturdy traveling crate, which I mentioned before. That can be added in the future. Note also the tray in the lower right corner of the white box in the image. The rehoused model now sits on this removable tray, allowing handling of the object without touching it directly. In the upper image on the left, I just want to remind everyone that I consider it important to keep all labels and other information that came with the original brown acidic box that we are discarding, to keep that in the file, because sometimes the original box may contain important information, and if I can't remove it, in case of these labels, I can remove them. But if it's written information on there, I take pictures and put those in the file. All important information to be kept for researchers. We try to communicate as much as possible before and during any actual intervention. It's like getting a second opinion of a doctor's office. Although curators and conservators often have different opinions, it is obvious that a non-hierarchical collegial approach, while discussing different treatment options, may best serve successful stewardship of collection items. I try to thoroughly document everything that is being done. That certainly takes time and discipline. I'm grateful that I have always been supported by my supervisors in that time-consuming effort of documentation. That's not always the case everywhere. Documentation is often neglected, and it's a very important part of the effort of conservation. Proper documentation of the conservation treatment is usually done in form of a written report of actions that were taken, the materials that I applied, and the analysis that may have been done, and of course an ongoing photography sequence best before, during, and after shots. All that with regard to conservation documentation is because we are aware that we can make mistakes, we can use the wrong material, and things may need to be undone in the future. That has happened many times, and if we don't have documentation, that is very hard to do. Besides the fact that we are changing the original. I'm showing you images of actual conservation treatments here because a non-treatment is difficult to depict. Though that may give you a wrong idea, because at the GRI we follow an approach of what we call minimal intervention, very similar to the Portuguese approach. That means that we stabilize the object where needed, re-adhere possibly detached fragments, but we usually avoid restoration by rebuilding or by adding new elements. At the Research Institute, we try to preserve as much original material and appearance as possible. Now I'm following several tracks simultaneously, and I hope you can follow me when I jump back and forth. Let's now leave the treatment of architectural models behind and look at the care we provide to architectural sketches and drawings, flat work. As most of you know, processing is a chain of in-house events that ultimately results in making an archive accessible. One of the first steps is to view and sort the material. The inventory should lead to the attribution of individual collection numbers and then cataloging. Most important is ample room for processing, allowing large quantities of fragile drawings of large dimensions to be moved around and set aside freely, or as freely as possible. In this case, we actually used an empty room that was sitting there and put many tables next to each other to process one entire incoming architectural archive. In that case, it was John Lautner, I believe. Temporary, short-term storage of pulled architectural drawings. Pulled means pulled out of pulled out for a specific project, which would be an exhibition or a loan that is upcoming. So temporary, short-term storage of pulled architectural drawings should best be provided individually in asset-free folders, in drawers of flat files, and storage units. But reality sometimes doesn't allow that. Even privileged institutions like the Getty have to find solutions to make ends meet. In the vaults, the long-term storage space for architectural drawings. Sorry, I'm going back. It's a new sentence. In the vaults, the long-term storage space for architectural drawings was about to be used up. Our mount maker came up with the idea of custom making extended aluminum brackets, which you see in the upper right corner. And these brackets were permitting 3 or even 4 rolls instead of the one roll that was permitted per level originally. That was using our finite space much more efficiently. On the other hand, let's jump again now to the topic of preventive conservation. From a conservation point of view, the drawings should be rolled with as few as possible other drawings around on acid-free core or tubes. They should be interleaved so there's no off-printing, protected by all-around mylar from dust or by Tyvek from light. So they are all wrapped, but not too many. For the housing, it is very important to use inert material wherever possible. Yeah. Inert being the non-reactive material with the original. It's especially important where it is actually touching the original material at the very center of the core. Obviously, other paper-based components of archival archives like the architect's correspondence with clients, personal notes, etc., can be kept in the same vault, the same environment conditions as the rolled architectural drawings, because they're all on paper. This vault, similar to Portugal and worldwide, this vault contains mostly paper-based archival material, and it's set at 50% relative humidity and 18 degrees centigrade. The climate in a total of 8 vaults that the GRI has, and the entire building for that matter, is controlled by a complex AC system, which is not without problems either. We all know about the importance of keeping fluctuations of relative humidity, the RH, and temperature within limits. That effort starts by monitoring the environment within the building, and possibly we monitor ourselves. Here you see in the GRI Conservation Lab, we are using a computer-based wireless data logging system, which we don't even have to take off the wall. Though I have to admit that I had trouble handling this program since I didn't use it often enough to remember certain procedures and tricks. Sometimes too fancy or too complicated technology is not serving the purpose well, especially if you have one person doing many things instead of somebody who's working with it every day. This is an in-house display case on the upper left. This location has significant seasonal differences of incident light. In winter, displayed items containing potentially fugitive colors are displayed at the higher risk due to the changed trajectory of the sun, which means increasing incident sunlight as the sun goes lower. As we monitor the light intensity with this device that you see in the lower right, and we monitor UV and visible light simultaneously, we have a better idea of the actual condition. Color monitoring provides us with data demonstrating that certain color pigments or substrates, which means the paper it may be on, for example, have changed color over a period of time, even if not yet visible to the naked eye. The shown X-Rite is the name. The shown X-Rite device reads and memorizes the color of a very small defined spot, for instance, before and after returning from an exhibition or loan. Conservators might use the argument of proven light sensitivity of a particular collection item. Occasionally, conservators need to let curators know that it would be better to deny next loan request of a popular collection item, which is requested a lot, and instead send a facsimile, which is a difficult argument to make sometimes. Another more recent technique, not depicted here, allows conservation scientists to test the light sensitivity of a tiny lens, but even smaller, before, and that is a very important difference, before the respective piece actually goes on loan or on display. That is a technology that is currently being developed at the Getty Conservation Institute, our neighbors. And you may be, if you're interested in that kind of technology, you may talk to Christel Pesme, who with her boss, Jim Druzek, is working on this project. It's called microphototesting. The GRI collaborates with the A+D Museum in Los Angeles. A+D stands for Architecture and Design. The A+D Museum is currently working on revising their electric lighting system. Note in the upper image on the right that the large street front windows of the building that has this orange line above make the control of light levels inside rather difficult. Generally, we verify climate conditions and light levels before and during exhibitions, most importantly, if considering loan requests from other institutions. If that is within the city limits of Los Angeles, like in the case of the A+D Museum, we might take our own readings at their site. Otherwise, if the request comes from afar, we trust the facility report telling us about specific circumstances of boring institutions relating security, temperature, relative humidity, lighting systems, opening hours. You may well know these facility reports. We have to trust in those. In our daily practice, we have witnessed that care and accessibility may be regarded as two dramatically opposing factors within our collecting institutions with an educational approach. We are aware that any viewing, even for the sake of research or education, or any handling, even if the purpose is improving the protection in the future, increases the risk for the collection item. High educational value of an exemplary object may well reduce its life expectancy. So it's not good to be popular. Can the conflict between care and accessibility be mitigated? It's the question I'm asking you, in fact. Does one of these two, care or accessibility, play a dominant role for you personally or for the institutions you happen to work for? Following now are a couple of examples of access the GRI is providing to students, its patrons, scholars, or donors. For instance, in this case, the lectures for local schools of architecture. There are 5 schools of architecture in Los Angeles. This one is Sci-Arc in Los Angeles. And this lecture is being given by Wim de Wit, who's the head of the head of the Department of Architecture and Contemporary Art. I will give his contact in the end. He's a source, he's a valuable resource. We also provide access for individuals with special credentials. In this case, it's Thomas Demand, who's a contemporary artist. He was a GRI artist in residence, which is part of the GRI Scholar Program. He actually also showed at the Sao Paulo Biennale. He photographs architectural models. He also builds models and photographs them. He's a photographer, contemporary artist. Is the solution to the dilemma to be found in a healthy balance between care and accessibility? Between care and access? Here you see a visit of the Board of Trustees of the John Lautner Foundation, curious about what is being done to the John Lautner archive after their donation to the GRI. The conservation treatment of some of their archival drawings, as seen below, was followed by mounting the paper in custom-made frames as part of a major exhibition project. You see that up in the upper image. That's an example of access and care, hand in hand. Nonetheless, we need to keep the increased risk for collection items in mind, especially during traveling exhibitions. Transport, handling, installation, lighting, etc. are all high-risk factors. In this case, this very John Lautner archive went on tour, and the related exhibition traveled to 3 venues in 2 continents. So all of the objects that had been chosen to be representing the John Lautner archive were put at high risk. This looks like the current future to me. Digitizing data provides an altered form of public access, online, obviously. But may I ask provocatively, will dissemination of information limit the urge for physical access to the original object? And if so, what would we be keeping the original item for after perfect scans have been taken? Is that too expensive? Can we afford that? While digitizing is in full swing already, I want to finish by mentioning 2 architectural projects that the Getty is working on currently. One dealing with care, the other one with the emphasis on access. These 2 images show the Eames House Conservation Project. You may recognize the house of Ray and Charles Eames. It is located in the Pacific Palisades, not far from the Getty. It's a district of Los Angeles. The project is being performed it's a collaboration between a local architect, the Getty Conservation Institute, and the Getty Foundation, which is financing the whole thing. It's a big collaboration, and it's worthwhile looking it up. In fact, Ana Paula Roto Gonçalves, a student of your school, worked hard on this project throughout the whole past year. And I also met another student, Luis Florence, another very industrious PhD student, I have to say, from your institution at the Getty recently. Here you see our initial visit to a potential lender to a major exhibition about architecture in and around Los Angeles between 1940 and 1990. The exhibition project is called Overdrive, Los Angeles Constructs the Future. It will open at the Getty Museum in April of next year. This effort is a major collaboration between the Getty Research Institute and the Getty Museum. And finally, I want to mention an idea of an open storage, which may not currently be a project, but it's a possible distant dream. It has come up over again, and when there's no money, it's being pushed aside, but it's, I think, something to keep in mind. This open storage would combine long-term storage of complex collection items in a dedicated storage or display space with immediate availability for viewing and study. So storage and viewing would be done in one. And there are examples in Europe that are doing that. With the crisis going on, support is being withdrawn, but it's a wonderful idea, especially for an institution like yours, where teaching is such an important part of your mission. And finally, I need to thank you for your attention, leaving you with a few contacts before opening up for questions. In case you can't think of any questions now, here are some sources of information for the future. The Getty website, as I mentioned earlier, is easy, www.getty.edu. And then you can go to research if you want to specifically look at the Research Institute. But the whole site is an extremely vast resource in itself. It has thesaurus, it has controlled vocabulary, much of the history of art and architecture is on there, and it's definitely worth a visit. The conservation-related issues can be sent to Mary Sackett, my boss. She's the head of GRI Conservation and Preservation Department, who kindly agreed to taking on upcoming questions since I recently changed jobs. So I started a new job last week, but my new address, which you are definitely welcome to send information or questions to, is my weird German name, albrecht.gumlich@bosch.com. Thank you.